Welcome to Her True Stories. If you enjoy this incredible tale of justice and revenge, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss our next amazing story. My name is Amanda Nimson, and at 76 years old, I thought I knew everything there was to know about betrayal. I was wrong.
Dead wrong.
But this story isn't just about how my own daughter pushed me down the stairs when I discovered where my life savings had gone. It's about how I got my revenge, and how sometimes the sweetest justice comes from the most unexpected places. Let me start at the beginning, when my world was still intact, even if it was built on lies I didn't yet know existed. I've lived in Millbrook, Connecticut my entire life. It's one of those picturesque New England towns where everyone knows everyone, where the maple trees turn brilliant red in October, and where secrets have a way of eventually surfacing like bodies in a lake. For 43 years, I worked as a librarian at the Millbrook Public Library, a job that suited my quiet nature and love of books. After my husband, Richard, died of a heart attack 7 years ago, that library became my sanctuary. Richard left me comfortable, not wealthy, but comfortable. Our modest two-story colonial on Elm Street was paid off, and between his pension, my savings, and Social Security, I could maintain my independence. Independence was everything to me. I'd seen too many elderly women become burdens to their children, and I was determined never to be one of them. My daughter Sarah was my pride and joy, or so I thought. At 42, she was a successful real estate agent with her own agency, married to Tom, a construction contractor. They lived in a beautiful contemporary home in the hills outside town with their 2 teenage children, Emma and Jake. Sarah had always been ambitious, even as a child. While other kids played with dolls, she was setting up lemonade stands and calculating profits. "Mom, you don't need to live alone in that big house," Sarah would say during our weekly Sunday dinners. "It's too much for you to maintain. You should think about moving somewhere smaller, maybe one of those nice senior communities." I always brushed off her suggestions. At 76, I was still sharp, still healthy, still perfectly capable of managing my own life. I drove myself to the grocery store, tended my garden, and even volunteered at the library twice a week. The house held too many memories of Richard for me to abandon it. But Sarah was persistent. Every conversation somehow circled back to my living situation, my finances, my safety. She worried about me falling, about break-ins, about my aging furnace. Her concern felt genuine, and I was touched by what I perceived as her loving care for her mother. "I just want what's best for you, Mom," she'd say, squeezing my hand across the dinner table. "Tom and I have been talking. Maybe you should consider moving in with us. We have that guest suite downstairs. You'd have your privacy, but we'd be there if you needed anything." The idea had some appeal, I'll admit. The house did feel empty without Richard. Sometimes I'd catch myself setting 2 plates for dinner out of habit, and the silence could be overwhelming. But something held me back, some instinct I should have trusted more. "I appreciate the offer, sweetheart," I'd tell her, "but I'm not ready yet. Maybe in a few years." Sarah would smile and nod, but I started noticing a tightness around her eyes, a forced quality to her laugh. I attributed it to her busy schedule. Real estate was demanding, especially in a competitive market like Fairfield County. What I didn't know was that Sarah's business was failing. The first real crack in my foundation of trust came on a rainy Tuesday in March. I was at the bank, making my usual monthly deposit for my pension check, when I struck up a conversation with Janet Mills, one of the tellers I'd known for years. "How's Sarah's new business venture going?" Janet asked casually as she processed my transaction. I looked at her blankly. "What new business venture?" Janet's expression shifted, and I could see her mentally backpedaling. "Oh, I thought she mentioned she was expanding into commercial properties. She was asking about investment loans a few months ago." "Investment loans?" Sarah hadn't mentioned anything about expanding her business or needing loans. We talked regularly, and she always seemed to be doing well. Just last month, she'd shown up to dinner wearing an expensive new watch and talking about planning a family vacation to Europe. I must have misunderstood, I said, forcing a smile. But Janet's words lodged in my mind like a splinter. That evening, I called Sarah.
So,
How's business going? Great, Mom. Really busy. Actually, I'm showing a house right now. Can I call you back later? She never called back. Over the next few weeks, I found myself paying closer attention to our conversations, looking for clues about her financial situation. Sarah was good at deflection. I'll give her that. Whenever I asked specific questions about her work, she'd change the subject to my health, my house, my future plans. The second crack came during Easter dinner at Sarah's house. Tom seemed distracted, barely participating in conversation. When I complimented their new granite countertops, he gave Sarah a sharp look. Those weren't exactly in the budget, he muttered. Sarah laughed it off. Tom's always worrying about money. The business is doing fine. But I saw the way she shot him a warning glance, the way he retreated into silence for the rest of the evening. The third crack came when I ran into Margaret Foster at the grocery store. Margaret's daughter worked at the real estate office across from Sarah's agency. I hear Sarah's having some challenges, Margaret said in the hushed, conspiratorial tone that middle-aged women use when discussing other people's misfortunes. Katie says there are rumors about missed payments, angry clients. Such a shame. She always seemed so successful. I defended Sarah, of course. Rumors in small towns were often exaggerated or completely false. But Margaret's words joined Janet's in that growing pile of splinters in my mind. The foundation truly cracked the day I decided to surprise Sarah at her office with lunch. I'd made her favorite chicken salad sandwiches and driven to the strip mall where her agency was located. The parking lot was nearly empty, which seemed odd for a Tuesday afternoon. Through the large front windows, I could see Sarah at her desk, but she wasn't alone. A man in an expensive suit was leaning over her desk, pointing at papers. Even from the parking lot, I could see the tension in Sarah's posture, the way she kept shaking her head. The man's gestures became more animated, more aggressive. Sarah appeared to be pleading with him. I sat in my car, watching this drama unfold, unsure whether to go in or leave. The decision was made for me when the man suddenly swept the papers off Sarah's desk in an angry gesture and stormed out of the office. He passed within feet of my car, his face red with rage. Sarah sat alone at her desk for several minutes, her head in her hands. When she finally looked up, I could see she was crying. I never did give her those sandwiches. Instead, I drove home with a growing certainty that my daughter was in serious trouble and an uncomfortable suspicion that her increasing pressure for me to move out of my house wasn't motivated entirely by concern for my welfare. That night, I lay awake in the bed I'd shared with Richard for 38 years, staring at the ceiling and listening to the old house settle around me. The foundation of my trust in Sarah had developed cracks, but I still believed they could be repaired. I still believed that whatever problems she was facing, we could work through them together. I had no idea that she'd already found her own solution to her financial problems, and that solution involved separating me from everything Richard and I had worked a lifetime to build. The plan was already in motion. I just didn't know it yet. But I would learn. Oh, how I would learn. And when I did, I would make sure that Sarah learned something too, that her 76-year-old mother wasn't the helpless, naive woman she thought I was. I had lived through the death of my husband, raised a daughter as a working single mother after Richard's first heart attack left him disabled for 2 years, and survived more challenges than Sarah could imagine. She was about to discover that some foundations, once broken, can be rebuilt stronger than before. And some revenge is worth waiting 76 years to deliver. The phone call came on a Thursday morning in early May, while I was watering my prize-winning roses in the front garden. I almost didn't answer. The number was unfamiliar, and I'd grown wary of robocalls. But something made me hurry inside and pick up on the fourth ring. Mrs. Nimson? This is David Chen from First National Bank. I'm calling about your loan application. My loan application? I sank into Richard's old recliner, confusion washing over me. I'm sorry, but I haven't applied for any loans. There was a pause. I have paperwork here showing an application for a $150,000 home equity loan against your property at 42 Elm Street. The application was submitted 3 weeks ago with your signature and social security number. My blood turned to ice water. That's impossible. I never signed anything like that. Mrs. Nimson, I understand this might be confusing, but the application shows you as the sole applicant. Your daughter Sarah was listed as your financial power of attorney and co-signed the documents. Financial power of attorney. Mr. Chun, I need to see these documents immediately. When can I come in? I have an opening at 2 o'clock this afternoon if that works for you. I was there at 1:45, my hands shaking as I signed in at the reception desk. David Chun was a kind-faced man in his 30s who clearly sensed something was wrong from the moment I sat down across from his desk. He spread the loan documents out before me, and my worst fears were confirmed. There was my signature, or rather, a very good forgery of my signature, on multiple pages. My social security number, my address, my income information, all perfectly accurate. And there, as clear as day, was Sarah's signature as my power of attorney. Mr. Chun, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I need you to understand something very clearly. I never signed these documents. I never gave my daughter power of attorney. This is fraud. His expression grew grave. Mrs. Nimson, these are very serious allegations. Are you absolutely certain? I pulled out my checkbook and wrote my signature on a piece of his notepaper. Even I could see the differences. The forged signature was close, but the in Amanda was subtly different, and my M's had a distinctive loop that the forgery lacked. Mr. Chen, has any money been disbursed from this loan? He consulted his computer screen, and I watched his face grow increasingly troubled. Yes, ma'am. The full $150,000 was transferred to an account at Millbrook Savings 3 days ago. The account holder is listed as Sarah Nimson Fletcher. The room spun around me. Sarah had stolen $150,000 using my house as collateral. My house, the home Richard and I had spent decades paying for, the place where we'd raised our daughter, the repository of every happy memory I had left. What are my options? I asked. Well, if this is indeed fraud, you'll need to file a police report. The bank will launch its own investigation. But, Mrs. Nimson, I have to warn you, until this is resolved, you're still legally responsible for the loan payments. The first payment of $1,200 is due in 30 days. $1,200 a month. On my fixed income, that would consume nearly half my monthly budget. Sarah knew that. She knew exactly what this would do to me. I left the bank in a daze, driving home on autopilot while my mind raced. How long had Sarah been planning this? The power of attorney documents were dated 6 months ago. She must have been forging my signature for practice. The level of premeditation was staggering. When I got home, I went straight to my small home office and began going through my files with new eyes. Everything seemed to be in order, but then I found something that made my heart stop. My savings account statements for the past 6 months were missing. I called the bank immediately and requested copies. What I learned made me physically ill. Over the past half year, there had been 5 withdrawals from my savings account, each for amounts just under $10,000, the threshold that would trigger automatic reporting. Someone had been slowly draining my nest egg, $47,000 in total. The signatures on the withdrawal slips were forgeries too. I sat in my kitchen as the sun set, staring at the evidence of my daughter's betrayal spread across the table. She hadn't just stolen from me. She'd been systematically robbing me for months while expressing concern for my welfare and pressuring me to move in with her. The cruelest part was that I now understood her endgame. She wanted me to lose the house to foreclosure, to become financially dependent on her. Once I was living in her guest suite, relying on her for everything, she would have complete control. I would be trapped, unable to expose her crimes without destroying my own security. It was a brilliant plan. Diabolical, but brilliant. But Sarah had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated her mother. I may have been 76, but I wasn't helpless. More importantly, I was angry, angrier than I'd ever been in my life. This wasn't just theft. It was a betrayal that cut to the very core of the mother-daughter bond I'd thought was sacred. My phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the caller ID.
Mom.
How was your day? I marveled at how normal she sounded, how easy the lies came to her. It was interesting, sweetheart. I had a meeting at the bank. A pause. Oh, everything okay with your accounts? Actually, no. There seem to be some discrepancies. Large withdrawals I don't remember making. And apparently someone has applied for a home equity loan in my name. The silence stretched so long I wondered if she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. That sounds terrible, Mom. Identity theft is such a problem these days. You should probably report it to the police. The sheer audacity took my breath away. She was actually encouraging me to report her own crimes to the authorities. I'm thinking about it, I said. The bank suggested I start by talking to family members, making sure no one has been helping with my finances without my knowledge. Of course not, Mom. You know Tom, and I would never do anything like that. Listen, why don't you come over for dinner tomorrow night? We can talk about this more, maybe help you figure out what happened. That sounds lovely, dear. After I hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of my kitchen and began to plan. Sarah thought she was so clever, but she'd forgotten something important. I'd been her mother for 42 years. I knew how her mind worked, how she solved problems, how she manipulated situations to her advantage. If she wanted to play games, I was ready to play. But this would be a game with my rules, and I intended to win. The first step was gathering more evidence. The second step was finding out exactly how deep her financial troubles ran. The third step would be setting a trap that would expose her crimes while protecting myself from further harm. And the final step? Making sure she paid for every penny she'd stolen and every moment of terror she'd put me through. Sarah had spent months planning my destruction. Now it was my turn to plan hers. I spent Friday preparing for battle, though Sarah would never suspect it. I dressed carefully for dinner, my navy blue dress with a pearl necklace Richard had given me for our 25th anniversary. I wanted to look like the trusting, vulnerable mother Sarah believed me to be. But hidden in my purse was a small digital recorder I'd bought that morning, along with copies of all the fraudulent documents from the bank. I'd also made a stop that would have surprised my daughter. The office of Patricia Holmes, the best private investigator in Fairfield County. Patricia was a former police detective who specialized in financial fraud cases. She was expensive, but after seeing the scope of Sarah's theft, I knew I needed professional help. I'd given her $5,000 from my emergency fund and a week to dig into Sarah and Tom's finances. Mrs. Nimson, Patricia had said, studying the bank documents, your daughter is facing some serious charges if this goes to court. Grand larceny, forgery, elder abuse. She could be looking at 10 to 15 years in prison. I'm not interested in sending her to prison, I'd replied. I want my money back, and I want to make sure she can never do this to anyone else. There must be other options. Patricia had smiled grimly. There are always other options. Let me see what I can find out about their financial situation. Knowledge is power, Mrs. Nimson. Now, as I rang the doorbell at Sarah's house, I felt that power humming beneath my skin. The recorder in my purse was voice activated, and I'd tested it thoroughly. Everything said that evening would be preserved for posterity. Tom answered the door, and I was struck by how haggard he looked. He'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. When he hugged me, I felt the tension in his shoulders. Amanda.
Good to see you. Come in, come in.
Sarah emerged from the kitchen wearing designer jeans and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. She kissed my cheek, and I marveled at how easily she maintained the facade of loving concern. Mom, you look wonderful. How are you feeling after yesterday's stress?
Better, I said.
I've been thinking a lot about what happened. Over dinner, an elaborate meal that must have cost $200 in ingredients, I carefully steered the conversation toward their finances. I complimented their recent home improvements, asked about their vacation plans, mentioned seeing a for sale sign at one of Sarah's listings. Business is actually a little slow right now, Sarah admitted. The market's been challenging.
Oh, dear.
Are you managing okay, financially? Tom shot Sarah a look that could have cut glass. We're managing. Actually, Mom, Sarah said, setting down her wine glass, Tom and I have been talking, and we think it's time to revisit our earlier conversation. About you moving in with us. Here it comes, I thought. Oh. With this identity theft situation, it's clear that someone is targeting you. You're vulnerable living alone. Here, we could keep an eye on your finances, help protect you from scammers. The irony was so thick, I nearly choked on my salmon. That's very thoughtful, but I'm not ready to give up my independence yet. Sarah leaned forward, her expression earnest. Mom, I know this is hard to hear, but you're not as sharp as you used to be. These financial discrepancies you mentioned, are you sure you didn't just forget making those withdrawals? Sometimes memory issues start subtly. My hands tightened on my napkin, but I kept my voice level. My memory is fine, Sarah. Of course it is, she said soothingly. But wouldn't it be easier to let Tom and me handle your finances? We could set up a simple system where your checks get deposited into our account, and we'd give you a monthly allowance for your expenses. That way, no one could take advantage of you. Tom was staring at his plate like it might spontaneously combust. Even he seemed uncomfortable with how brazen Sarah was being. I see, I said. And how much would this monthly allowance be? Oh, we'd be very generous. Maybe $800 a month? That should cover your personal expenses since you wouldn't have housing costs anymore. $800. Out of my $2,400 monthly income. She was planning to steal nearly 70% of my pension and Social Security. That does sound convenient, I said. But what about my house? I'd hate to lose it. Well, Sarah said carefully, the housing market is still strong. We could sell it and invest the proceeds for your future care needs. My future care needs. Translation: Sarah's current financial needs. Have you already had it appraised? I asked innocently. Sarah's cheeks flushed slightly. Just informally. Tom thinks it would sell for around $400,000. I nodded as if this was all perfectly reasonable, but inside I was marveling at the audacity. She'd already had my house appraised. She'd planned every detail of my financial destruction. There's just one small problem, I said, pulling the loan documents from my purse. Someone has already taken out a $150,000 loan against the house. I can't sell it until that's resolved. The color drained from Sarah's face. Tom looked up from his plate, confused. What loan? He asked. I handed him the documents and watched his expression change as he read. When he got to Sarah's signature, his face went ashen. Sarah, he said quietly, what the hell is this? I can explain. But Sarah was looking at me, not Tom, and I could see the moment she realized I knew everything. Please do explain, I said calmly. Because according to these documents, you've been my power of attorney for 6 months, and you've authorized a loan I never applied for. Tom was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. Sarah, tell me you didn't forge your mother's signature. It's not what it looks like, Sarah said desperately. Mom, you don't understand. We were going to pay it back. The business just needed a short-term injection of capital. I was going to tell you. When? I interrupted. When were you going to tell me? Before or after I lost my house to foreclosure? You weren't going to lose the house. Sarah snapped, and for the first time, her mask slipped completely. You were going to move in here, and we were going to handle everything. Without my consent. Without my knowledge. After stealing my savings account dry. Tom's head jerked up. Savings account. I pulled out the bank statements showing the unauthorized withdrawals. Tom read them in silence, his jaw tightening with each page.
Jesus Christ, Sarah.
$47,000? On top of the loan. We needed the money. Sarah was fully unraveled now, her voice rising. The business is failing, Tom. We're 3 months behind on our mortgage. The IRS is breathing down our necks, and you've been burying your head in the sand pretending everything is fine. So you decided to rob your mother? I was protecting our family. Mom doesn't need all that money. She lives like a pauper anyway. She was just going to leave it all to charity when she dies. The casual cruelty of that statement hit me like a physical blow. In Sarah's mind, I was already dead, my money already hers by right. Actually, I said, standing up, I've been reconsidering my will lately. I gathered the documents and put them back in my purse. Thank you for dinner. It was very illuminating. Sarah grabbed my arm as I moved toward the door.
Mom, wait.
We can work this out. As a family. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then met her eyes. Sarah, you ceased to be my family the moment you decided to steal from me. Don't call me again unless it's to discuss repaying every penny you've taken. You don't understand the position you're putting me in, she said, her voice turning threatening. If you report this to the police, I'll go to prison. Is that what you want? To destroy your only daughter's life? What I want, I said, pulling free of her grip, is my money back. All of it. You have 72 hours to figure out how to make that happen. I walked out, leaving them to their argument. As I got in my car, I could hear shouting from inside the house. Tom's voice, raised in anger. Sarah's, shrill with panic. The recorder in my purse had captured every word. Driving home through the dark streets of Millbrook, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Sarah's desperation was showing, and desperate people make mistakes. She'd revealed the depth of their financial crisis, admitted to the theft on tape, and shown her true colors to her husband. But more importantly, she'd underestimated me one final time. She thought I was a helpless old woman who would eventually cave to family pressure and keep quiet about her crimes. She was about to learn how wrong she was. When I got home, I called Patricia Holmes. Mrs. Nimson? How did dinner go? Better than expected. I have a full confession on tape. How's your investigation progressing? Very well. I think you're going to be very interested in what I've discovered about your daughter's business practices. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? Absolutely. Patricia, how quickly can financial fraud cases move through the system? If the evidence is solid? Very quickly, especially when it involves elder abuse. Why? I smiled in the darkness of my kitchen. Because Sarah seems to think she has time to maneuver her way out of this. I want to make sure she doesn't. I'll make some calls tonight. We can have this moving by Monday morning if you're ready to proceed. I'm ready. After I hung up, I sat in Richard's chair and thought about the woman who had raised me. My mother had been a steel magnolia, sweet and genteel on the surface, but with a core of pure iron. She taught me that a lady never loses her temper in public, never shows weakness to her enemies, and never, ever forgives someone who betrays her family. Sarah had forgotten those lessons, but I was about to remind her. Saturday morning brought unexpected visitors. I was having my coffee and reading the newspaper when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Tom standing on my front porch alone. He looked like he hadn't slept. I took my time answering the door, studying his face through the security chain. Dark stubble, bloodshot eyes, rumpled clothes. The confident contractor I'd known for 15 years had been replaced by a broken man. "Amanda, please.
I need to talk to you."
I let him in and gestured toward the living room. He sat heavily on the couch, burying his face in his hands. "She's gone," he said finally. "Gone. Left around midnight. Took the kids to her sister's house in Boston. Said she needed time to think." He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "Amanda, I swear to God, I didn't know about any of this. The loan, the withdrawals, I had no idea." I studied his face carefully. Tom had always been a terrible liar, and I could see the genuine anguish there. "What did you know?" "I knew we were in trouble financially. The construction business has been brutal the last 2 years, and Sarah's real estate commissions were way down. But I thought we were managing. I trusted her to handle the books." He laughed bitterly. "Stupid, right? How bad is it, Tom?" He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. "I spent the night going through everything. We're $340,000 in debt. Credit cards, business loans, back taxes. The house is in pre-foreclosure. We haven't made a payment in 4 months." I felt a stab of sympathy for him, which surprised me. Tom was collateral damage in Sarah's war against financial reality. "What about Emma and Jake?" I asked. My grandchildren were 17 and 15, old enough to understand that their world was collapsing. They don't know the details yet. Sarah told them we're having some temporary financial problems. His voice cracked. "Amanda, what am I supposed to tell them? That their mother is a criminal? You tell them the truth. Age appropriately, but the truth." Tom was quiet for a long moment. "What are you going to do?" "About Sarah, I mean." I had planned to keep my strategy to myself, but looking at this broken man, the father of my grandchildren, I felt compelled to be honest. "I'm going to pursue criminal charges unless she returns every penny she stole. All of it, Tom. The loan, the withdrawals, plus interest and damages. That's nearly $200,000. We don't have it." Then she should have thought of that before she decided to rob her mother. Tom nodded slowly. "You're right. God help me. You're absolutely right. I keep thinking about Emma and Jake. This is going to destroy them. Sarah destroyed them, not me. I'm just cleaning up the mess." My phone rang. Patricia Holmes. "Excuse me, Tom. I need to take this." I went into the kitchen for privacy. "Patricia?" "Mrs. Nimson, I've got some interesting developments. Can you meet me at my office in an hour?" "I'll be there." When I returned to the living room, Tom was standing by the mantel, looking at family photos. He picked up one from Emma's high school graduation last year, Sarah beaming with pride, her arm around our beautiful granddaughter. "She wasn't always like this," he said quietly. "The Sarah I married was ambitious, sure, but she was also kind. Generous."
I don't know when that changed.
"People don't change, Tom. They just get better at hiding who they really are." Patricia Holmes' office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, all hardwood floors and exposed brick walls. Patricia herself was an elegant woman in her 50s with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Nimson, please sit down. What I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear." She spread a thick folder across her desk. "Your daughter's financial crimes go far beyond what she's done to you. I've found evidence of at least 12 other instances of fraud over the past 18 months. My stomach dropped. 12. Real estate clients, mostly. She's been taking advantage of elderly sellers, manipulating contracts, skimming money from escrow accounts. The total amount we can verify is close to $400,000. I stared at the documents in shock. My God, how has she gotten away with it? Most of her victims don't even know they've been robbed yet. She's very good at selecting vulnerable targets and covering her tracks. But it's all starting to unravel. Patricia pulled out a timeline she'd created. The pattern started about 2 years ago, right around the time Tom's construction business began struggling. Small amounts at first, a few $100s skimmed from a closing here, an inflated commission there. But as their financial situation worsened, the thefts became more brazen. What about the real estate board? Doesn't she have oversight? She does, and that's the key to our strategy. I've been in contact with the state licensing authority. They're very interested in our evidence. If we can prove a pattern of fraud against clients, they'll not only revoke her license, but also pursue criminal charges that carry mandatory prison time. I thought about Emma and Jake, about the shame they would carry for the rest of their lives. Is there another way? Patricia leaned back in her chair. There might be, but it would require your cooperation in setting up a sting operation. What kind of sting? We let Sarah think she can negotiate her way out of this. Meanwhile, we record every conversation, gather more evidence, and give her enough rope to hang herself completely. The goal would be to get a full confession and a detailed accounting of all her crimes. I considered this. And then we give her a choice. Make full restitution to all her victims and accept permanent disbarment from real estate, or face criminal prosecution for the full scope of her crimes. It was elegant, I had to admit. Sarah would lose her livelihood and her reputation, but she might avoid prison if she cooperated fully. There's one more thing, Patricia said. I did some checking on your son-in-law. Tom's business troubles aren't entirely market-related. Sarah has been systematically draining his business accounts to fund her lifestyle and cover her losses. The man is essentially broke because his wife has been embezzling from him too.
Poor Tom.
He was as much a victim as I was. What do you need from me? I asked. Let her come to you. She will. She's desperate, and you're her only hope of avoiding prison. When she does, you'll be wearing a wire. I left Patricia's office with a strange sense of anticipation. The hunter had become the hunted, and Sarah didn't even know it yet. When I got home, there were 6 missed calls from Sarah on my answering machine. The messages grew increasingly frantic. Mom, please call me back. We need to talk. Mom, I know you're angry, but we're family. We can work this out. Mom, you don't understand what you're doing. If you report this, it won't just hurt me. It'll hurt Emma and Jake too. Mom, please. I'm begging you. Just give me a chance to explain. The final message was different. Sarah's voice was cold, controlled. Mom, I'm coming over tonight. We're going to settle this once and for all. I called Patricia immediately. She's coming here tonight. Perfect. I'll be there in 30 minutes with the recording equipment. As I waited for Patricia to arrive, I found myself thinking about the little girl Sarah had been. Bright, determined, always pushing boundaries, but never with genuine malice. When had that ambitious child become a woman capable of stealing from her own mother? Maybe Tom was wrong. Maybe people could change, given the right pressures and the wrong choices. But if Sarah thought she could intimidate me into silence, she was about to learn that some changes worked both ways. Her 76-year-old mother had some surprises left in her. Patricia had just finished attaching the tiny recording device to my blouse when Sarah's car pulled into my driveway. Through the window, I could see her sitting in the driver's seat for several minutes, gathering courage or perhaps rehearsing her arguments. Remember, Patricia whispered, let her do most of the talking. Ask open-ended questions. Try to get her to admit to specific amounts and dates. Patricia slipped out through the back door just as Sarah rang the front doorbell. I took a deep breath, smoothed my skirt, and went to face my daughter. Sarah looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared from crying. The designer clothes were wrinkled, as if she'd slept in them. "Mom," she said, stepping inside without invitation. "Thank God you're home. We need to talk." "Of course, dear. Would you like some tea?"
No, y.
She stopped, studying my face. "Why are you being so calm about this?" I settled into my favorite chair and gestured for her to sit on the couch. "What would you have me do, Sarah? Scream?
Cry?
Fall apart? I don't know. React somehow. Your daughter just confessed to stealing from you, and you're offering me tea. You're right. Let me react properly." I folded my hands in my lap and looked directly at her. "Sarah Elizabeth Nimson Fletcher, you have stolen nearly $200,000 from your mother. You forged my signature, violated my trust, and planned to make me homeless. How exactly should I react to that?" Her composure cracked slightly. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I was going to pay it all back."
When?
With what money? The business was going to turn around. Real estate always bounces back. I just needed time. I leaned forward. "Sarah, tell me about the other clients you've stolen from." Her face went white. "What are you talking about?" "The Hendersons. Mrs. Patterson. The Kowalski estate." Should I continue? Sarah stared at me in shock. "How do you know about your pattern of fraud? Your systematic theft from vulnerable clients?" "I know everything, Sarah." She began to shake. "Mom, you don't understand. The pressure I've been under, the stress." "So, you decided to steal from elderly people who trusted you?" "It wasn't stealing. I was borrowing. I was going to pay everyone back once." "Once what?" "Once you sold my house out from under me? Once you drained my accounts completely?" Sarah suddenly stood up, pacing to the window. When she turned back, her expression had hardened.
Fine.
"You want to know the truth? Yes, I took money from clients. Yes, I forged your signature. But what choice did I have? You had the choice to live within your means. You had the choice to ask for help. You had the choice to be honest." "Honest?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "Like you were honest with me about your will?" I blinked.
What?
"I saw the new will, Mom. The one you had drawn up last month. Leaving everything to charity, cutting me out completely." My blood chilled. I hadn't changed my will recently. "Sarah, what are you talking about?" She pulled a folded document from her purse and threw it on the coffee table. "Don't play dumb. I found this in your desk drawer when I was looking for your insurance papers." I picked up the document with trembling hands. It was indeed a will, or rather a very good forgery of a will. It left my entire estate to various charities, with only token amounts to Sarah and the grandchildren. "Sarah, this isn't my will. I didn't write this." "Stop lying," she screamed. "I know you hate me. I know you think I'm a failure. Well, guess what? I don't need your money anymore. I've already taken what's rightfully mine." The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Sarah hadn't just been stealing from me. She'd been justifying it by creating a fake will that made her believe she was being disinherited. She'd manufactured her own motive. "Sarah, sit down. Let me show you something." I went to my desk and pulled out my real will, the one Richard and I had drafted years ago. It left everything to Sarah, with trust funds for the grandchildren. Sarah's face crumpled as she read it. But this other will? You created it, didn't you? To justify what you were doing to me." She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. "I don't know what happened to me. I started out just borrowing a little bit from the escrow accounts. Then the business got worse, and Tom's job started drying up, and I couldn't pay it back. So I borrowed more. And then you came after me. I saw an opportunity. You have all this money just sitting there, and you live like you're poor. I thought, I thought if I could just get control of your finances, I could invest it properly, make it grow, pay everyone back. By forging my signature and stealing my home, I was going to take care of you. You would have been comfortable in our house. The kids love you. It would have been perfect. I stared at my daughter, this woman I'd raised, loved, sacrificed for, and felt something die inside me. Sarah, do you hear yourself? You're still trying to justify stealing from your mother. It's not stealing when it's family. It's exactly stealing when it's family. It's worse than stealing because you're also destroying the relationship. Sarah wiped her eyes, and I could see her shifting tactics. Mom, please. I know I made mistakes, but if you report this to the police, Emma and Jake will be devastated. Is that what you want? To destroy your grandchildren's lives? The manipulation was so transparent, it was almost insulting. My grandchildren's lives are being destroyed by their mother's choices, not by my response to those choices. But if you just let me work this out.
How?
You're $340,000 in debt. Your real estate license is about to be revoked. Tom's business is failing. Where exactly is this money going to come from? Sarah's eyes darted around the room, and I could practically see the wheels turning. The house. Your house is worth $400,000. If we sell it, If you sell it and give me the proceeds, I can pay everyone back and start over. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Even now, caught red-handed, she was trying to con me out of more money. Sarah, let me make something very clear. You will not get one more penny from me. In fact, you're going to return every penny you've already stolen. Her expression turned ugly. And if I don't, then you go to prison. You wouldn't do that to your own daughter. I stood up, decision made. Try me. Sarah stood too, and for a moment I saw something dangerous flash in her eyes. Mom, you need to be very careful here. Accidents happen to elderly people living alone. Falls downstairs. Heart attacks from stress. The threat was unmistakable, and ice ran through my veins. But I kept my voice steady. Is that a threat, Sarah? It's a reality check. You're 76 years old, living alone in a big house. If something happened to you, who would know? Who would care? I walked to the front door and opened it. Get out. Mom, get out of my house. Now. Sarah grabbed her purse, her face twisted with rage. You're going to regret this. I'm not going down alone. Yes, you are, I said quietly. Because unlike you, I'm not a criminal. After she left, I sat in my living room shaking. Patricia emerged from the kitchen where she'd been listening. Did you get all that? I asked. Every word, including the threats. Patricia's expression was grim. Mrs. Nimson, I think we need to accelerate our timeline. Your daughter is becoming desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. What do you recommend? We take everything we have to the district attorney's office first thing Monday morning. The threats she just made, combined with the financial evidence, should be enough for an arrest warrant. I nodded, feeling simultaneously relieved and heartbroken. Patricia, what about Emma and Jake? They'll survive this. Children are more resilient than we give them credit for. And they'll be better off in the long run knowing the truth about their mother. That night, I lay in bed thinking about the conversation. Sarah's transformation from my loving daughter to a woman capable of threatening my life was complete. The child I'd raised was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. But I was done being a victim. Sarah had made her choices, and now she would face the consequences. Tomorrow, I would make some choices of my own. And Sarah was going to discover that her elderly mother had learned a thing or two about playing hardball. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching my mood as Patricia and I walked into the Fairfield County District Attorney's office. We'd requested an emergency meeting with ADA Michelle Rodriguez, a prosecutor known for her aggressive pursuit of white-collar criminals. Rodriguez was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with sharp dark eyes and an air of competence that immediately put me at ease. She listened to our presentation without interruption, studying the evidence Patricia had compiled. "Mrs. Nimson," she said finally, "this is one of the most comprehensive financial fraud cases I've seen in years. Your daughter has committed multiple felonies against numerous victims. We're looking at potential sentences totaling 20 to 30 years. The number hit me like a physical blow. 20 to 30 years? Elder abuse carries enhanced penalties, and the pattern of fraud against multiple victims makes this a career criminal case. Add in the threats she made against you on Saturday night, and we could also charge her with attempted extortion and intimidation of a witness." Patricia leaned forward. "What are Amanda's options for protecting herself while ensuring justice for all the victims?" Rodriguez consulted her notes. "We can offer your daughter a plea deal if she cooperates fully. Complete restitution to all victims, cooperation in recovering assets, and a guilty plea to reduce charges. She'd still serve time, probably 5 to 7 years, but it beats life in prison. And if she doesn't cooperate, then we prosecute to the full extent of the law." I thought about Emma and Jake, about Tom trying to hold his family together. How quickly can this move forward? I can have an arrest warrant by this afternoon. But Mrs. Nimson, I need to ask, are you prepared for what comes next? This will be public. Your family situation will be in the newspapers. Your daughter will likely try to paint you as a vindictive mother destroying her family. I straighten my shoulders. "Ms. Rodriguez, my daughter chose this path when she decided to steal from her mother. I'm simply choosing not to be her victim anymore."
Good.
"Patricia, I'll need all your evidence files transferred to our office. Mrs. Nimson, I'll have a detective contact you about your testimony." As we left the DA's office, I felt a strange sense of liberation. For months, I'd been reacting to Sarah's actions. Now I was taking control of my own destiny. My phone rang as Patricia was driving me home. Tom's number. "Amanda, where are you?" "Something's happened." "What kind of something?" "Sarah's back. She showed up this morning with a U-Haul truck and 3 men I don't recognize. They're loading furniture and boxes." My stomach dropped. "She's removing evidence." That's what I thought. I tried to stop them, but Sarah says she has a right to take her personal belongings. "Amanda, they took the computer that has all our financial records on it." "Call the police, Tom. Right now." "I already did. They're on their way." Patricia had heard my end of the conversation and was already turning the car around. We need to get there before she destroys everything. When we arrived at Tom and Sarah's house, it was chaos. 2 police cars were in the driveway, and I could see uniformed officers talking to a group of men standing beside a half-loaded truck. Sarah was nowhere to be seen. Tom met us at the front door, his face grim. "She's barricaded herself in the home office. Says she won't come out until the police leave." Officer Martinez, whom I recognized from the neighborhood, approached us. "Mrs. Nimson, I understand you filed a complaint against your daughter. The district attorney's office is issuing an arrest warrant this afternoon. She's trying to destroy evidence. Do you have a copy of the warrant?" Patricia handed him a document. "This is a court order authorizing the seizure of financial records related to the fraud investigation." Martinez studied it, then nodded to his partner. "Ma'am, we're going to need your daughter to come out and speak with us." What followed was a 2-hour standoff. Sarah refused to leave the office, claiming she was having a medical emergency and couldn't be moved. The police couldn't break down the door without a specific warrant, and Sarah knew it. Finally, ADA Rodriguez arrived with a full search warrant and a team of forensic accountants. "Sarah Fletcher," Rodriguez called through the office door. "This is the district attorney's office. We have a warrant to search these premises and seize any computers, files, or financial records related to your business activities. You have 60 seconds to open this door before we break it down." The door opened immediately. Sarah emerged looking defiant but scared, flanked by a lawyer I didn't recognize, an expensive-looking man in $1,000 suit. "My client has nothing to say," the lawyer announced. "She doesn't need to say anything," Rodriguez replied. "Sarah Fletcher, you're under arrest for grand larceny, elder abuse, forgery, and witness intimidation." As the handcuffs clicked around Sarah's wrists, she looked directly at me. "I hope you're happy, Mom. You've destroyed your own family." "No, Sarah," I said quietly. "You did that all by yourself." The forensic team spent 4 hours going through the house, seizing computers, files, and boxes of documents. They found evidence of crimes even Patricia hadn't discovered: fraudulent tax returns, shell companies created to hide assets, forged client signatures on dozens of real estate transactions. Tom watched it all in stunned silence. When the police finally left with Sarah in custody, he sank into his living room chair like a broken man. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we start putting the pieces back together," I said. "Tom, you're as much a victim here as anyone else. Sarah stole from you too. But the house, the business, it's all gone." Patricia sat down across from him. "Actually, it might not be. If we can prove that Sarah used fraudulent means to accumulate debt in your name, those debts might be dischargeable. You could potentially save the house." Tom looked up with the first spark of hope I'd seen in his eyes. "Really? It's complicated, but possible. You'll need a good bankruptcy attorney." I thought about Emma and Jake, about the hell their teenage years were about to become. "Tom, the kids, how are they handling this?" "They don't know yet. They're still at Sarah's sister's house. I have to drive to Boston tonight to tell them their mother has been arrested." He buried his face in his hands. "How do I explain this to them?" "The same way you explained their grandfather's death," I said. "With love, honesty, and the promise that you'll get through it together." That evening, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea and the local newspaper. Sarah's arrest had made the front page. "Local realtor arrested for elder abuse." The article detailed the charges and mentioned that she'd allegedly stolen nearly $200,000 from her elderly mother. My phone had been ringing all day. Neighbors, former library colleagues, old friends expressing shock and support. The consensus seemed to be that I'd done the right thing, but it still hurt. Patricia stopped by around 8 o'clock with an update. "Sarah's being held on $500,000 bail," she reported. Her lawyer tried to get it reduced, but the judge was concerned about flight risk given the severity of the charges. "So she'll stay in jail?" "Unless someone comes up with $50,000 for a bail bondsman. Given her financial situation, that seems unlikely." I felt a complex mix of emotions: satisfaction that justice was being served, but also sadness that it had come to this. "Patricia, I want to make sure all of Sarah's victims get their money back. How do we make that happen?" "The court will order restitution as part of any plea deal. The question is whether there are enough recoverable assets to make full restitution possible." "What if there aren't?" Patricia was quiet for a moment. "Then the victims, including you, will have to accept partial repayment and the satisfaction of seeing Sarah held accountable." As I prepared for bed that night, I realized that the hardest part wasn't over. It was just beginning. Sarah would likely be in prison for several years. Emma and Jake would need support and guidance. Tom would have to rebuild his life from scratch. But for the first time in months, I felt safe in my own home. The immediate threat was over, and I was no longer anyone's victim. In the morning, I would start the process of reclaiming my life and helping my family heal from the damage Sarah had done. But tonight, I would sleep peacefully, knowing that justice was finally being served. The call came at 6:30 a.m., jolting me from the first peaceful sleep I'd had in weeks. ADA Rodriguez's voice was tense. "Mrs. Nimson, we have a problem. Your daughter posted bail this morning." I sat up in bed, instantly alert. "That's impossible. You said she needed $50,000. Someone wired the money at midnight. We're trying to trace the source, but it appears to have come from an offshore account. My blood ran cold. Where is she now? Unknown. She was released an hour ago, and she's not at her house. Mrs. Nimson, given the threats she made against you, I think you should consider staying somewhere else for a few days. After hanging up, I immediately called Tom. No answer. I tried his cell phone, then the house phone again. Nothing. Patricia arrived within 20 minutes of my call, her face grim. I've been monitoring police scanners. There was a disturbance at Tom's house around 4 a.m. Neighbors reported shouting. We drove to Sarah's house together, my heart pounding with each mile. When we arrived, Tom's pickup truck was in the driveway, but something was wrong. The front door was standing open, and there were obvious signs of a struggle. Overturned furniture, broken glass, papers scattered across the lawn. We need to call the police, Patricia said, pulling out her phone. But before she could dial, Tom appeared in the doorway. His face was bruised, his shirt torn, and he was moving carefully, as if in pain. Tom. I rushed toward him. What happened? Sarah, he said simply. She came back around 4 a.m. with those same men from yesterday. They wanted the external hard drives from my computer, the ones the police didn't find. Did you give them to her? I tried to, but I'd hidden them at my mother's house yesterday before the police arrived. When I told Sarah that, he touched his swollen jaw. She didn't take it well. Patricia was already on the phone with 911. Tom, did they say where they were going? Sarah kept talking about Mexico. Something about having accounts there that the police would never find. My mind raced. If Sarah fled the country, she could disappear forever, leaving her victims with no hope of recovering their money. Tom, those hard drives, what's on them? Everything. Banking records, client files, shell company documents. Sarah thought she was so clever, but she kept records of every transaction. Within minutes, police cars were swarming the house. Detective Morrison, who was leading the investigation, questioned Tom extensively about the morning's events. Mr. Fletcher, did your wife give any indication of her specific plans? She said something about a boat, that they were going to take a boat to Mexico tonight. Morrison nodded grimly. We'll alert the Coast Guard and Border Patrol. But Mrs. Nimson, I have to be honest, if she makes it out of the country, extradition from Mexico is complicated. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Police put out a BOLO alert for Sarah's car. The FBI was contacted because of the potential for international flight. And Patricia began working her contacts to freeze any accounts Sarah might try to access. At noon, my phone rang. Sarah's number. Answer it, Detective Morrison said, quickly setting up recording equipment. Keep her talking as long as possible. I picked up the phone with shaking hands. Hello, Sarah.
Mom.
Her voice was eerily calm. I wanted to say goodbye. Where are you? Somewhere safe. Somewhere you'll never find me. Sarah, it doesn't have to be this way. If you come back, if you cooperate with the authorities. Cooperate? She laughed bitterly. So, I can spend the next 20 years in prison? I don't think so. What about Emma and Jake? You're just going to abandon your children? There was a long pause. They're better off without me. Tom's a good father. He'll take care of them. Sarah, please. Think about what you're doing. I am thinking. For the first time in months, I'm thinking clearly. You want to know something funny, Mom? I'm not even angry anymore. This whole mess started because I was trying to live up to your expectations, trying to be the successful daughter you wanted. I never put that pressure on you. Didn't you? Every conversation was about how proud you were of my business, my house, my achievements. What was I supposed to do when it all started falling apart? Admit to you that I was a failure? Despite everything she'd done, I felt a stab of pain, hearing the hurt in her voice. Sarah, you could have come to me. We could have worked through this together. Like we worked through Dad's death? You were so strong, so perfect. You never needed anyone. How was I supposed to tell you I was drowning? I closed my eyes, remembering the years after Richard's death when I'd focused all my energy on appearing strong for Sarah's sake. Had I been too strong? Had I taught her that vulnerability was weakness? Mom, are you there? I'm here. I want you to know something. The money I took from you, it wasn't about greed. It was about survival. My business was failing, and I was desperate. But what about the other clients? The elderly people you stole from? Another pause. That was different. Once I started, I couldn't stop. It was like an addiction. Each time I told myself it would be the last time, but then another crisis would come up. Detective Morrison was making frantic gestures, pointing to his watch. They needed more time to trace the call. Sarah, where are you going? What's your plan? I have friends in Mexico. People who can help me start over. What about the money? All the money you stole? Most of it's gone, Mom. The business debts, the credit cards, the lifestyle we couldn't afford. There's maybe $50,000 left in offshore accounts. $50,000 out of nearly $400,000 stolen from various victims. The scope of the destruction was staggering. Sarah, if you run now, you'll be running for the rest of your life. You'll never see your children grow up, never meet your grandchildren. I know. Her voice broke for the first time. But it's better than spending the rest of my life in prison. Listen to me. The line went dead. Detective Morrison immediately got on his radio, coordinating with various agencies. But I could see in his face that the trace hadn't been successful. She's smart, he said grimly. Probably using burner phones and moving frequently. Patricia put her arm around my shoulders. Amanda, you did everything you could. But had I? As I sat in Tom's destroyed living room, I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah's words. Had my strength after Richard's death inadvertently taught her that asking for help was a sign of weakness? Had I been so focused on being independent that I'd failed to show her how to be vulnerable? My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Take care of Emma and Jake. Tell them I loved them. S. I showed the message to Detective Morrison. This sounds like a goodbye message. She's definitely planning to disappear. As the afternoon wore on, reports came in from various agencies. Sarah's car had been found abandoned at a marina in Bridgeport. Security cameras showed her boarding a private yacht with 3 men around 2 p.m. The Coast Guard was searching the waters off Connecticut, but in a boat, Sarah could reach international waters within hours. By evening, it was clear that she was gone. What happens now? Tom asked as the last of the police cars pulled away from his house. Now we start the process of asset recovery, Patricia replied. The court will seize whatever property and accounts they can find. Your house, Sarah's business assets, any recoverable funds. And the victims? They'll get whatever the court can recover, divided proportionally based on their losses. I thought about Mrs. Patterson, the widow Sarah had stolen from, about the Kowalski family, who'd trusted Sarah to handle their father's estate, about all the people whose retirement dreams had been shattered by my daughter's greed. Patricia, I want to do something. For the other victims. What do you mean? My house is worth $400,000. If I sell it and put the proceeds into the Victim Restitution Fund, it would go a long way toward making people whole. Tom looked at me in shock. Amanda, you can't do that. Sarah stole from you too. Yes, but I have other resources. My pension, my savings accounts that she didn't touch. I can survive. Some of these other victims can't. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Amanda, that's incredibly generous, but are you sure? That house is your security. Your legacy. I looked around at the destruction Sarah had left in her wake. Broken furniture, shattered glass, a family torn apart by greed and deception. My real legacy isn't a house, I said finally. It's how I choose to respond to this crisis. Richard and I always believed in doing the right thing, even when it was difficult. Especially when it was difficult. That evening, as I sat alone in my kitchen, I realized that Sarah's escape had actually simplified things for me. I no longer had to wrestle with conflicting emotions about prosecuting my own daughter. She'd made her choice, and now I was free to make mine. Tomorrow, I would call a realtor and put my house on the market. I would make sure that everyone Sarah had hurt got some measure of justice, even if she escaped it herself. Sarah thought she'd won by disappearing with the last of the stolen money. But she'd actually given me something far more valuable than revenge, the opportunity to transform a story of betrayal into one of redemption. And sometimes, the best revenge is proving that you're better than the person who hurt you. 6 weeks after Sarah's disappearance, I stood in the empty living room of my house on Elm Street, watching the new owners do their final walkthrough. The Petersons were a young couple with 2 small children, the kind of family Richard and I had dreamed of being when we first bought this house 43 years ago. Mrs. Nimson, Mrs. Peterson said, approaching me with a warm smile, "Are you sure you don't want to take the rose bushes? They're absolutely beautiful." I looked out the window at the garden I'd tended for decades. They belong with the house now. Besides, where I'm going, I won't have room for a garden that size. The closing had gone smoothly, netting $387,000 after fees and commissions. Combined with the $47,000 the court had recovered from Sarah's accounts, it meant that every one of her victims would receive full restitution, plus interest. Patricia had called it unprecedented. "In 20 years of financial fraud cases, I've never seen anything like this," she'd said. "Victims usually recover pennies on the dollar, if anything. But for me, it felt like the only possible choice. These weren't numbers on a spreadsheet. They were real people whose lives had been shattered by my daughter's crimes." Mrs. Patterson, the 82-year-old widow Sarah had stolen $23,000 from, had cried when I told her she'd be getting her money back. The Kowalski family could finally settle their father's estate. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson could pay for the medical bills Sarah's theft had forced them to put on credit cards. Tom picked me up after the closing, helping me load the last of my belongings into his truck. He'd been staying in a hotel since Sarah's disappearance, unable to bear living in the house where she'd assaulted him. "Have you heard anything from the FBI?" I asked as we drove across town. "Nothing concrete. They think she made it to Mexico, but the trail goes cold in Cancun. She could be anywhere by now." I'd been surprised by how little I thought about Sarah's whereabouts. The sharp pain of her betrayal had settled into a dull ache, like the arthritis in my knees, always there, but manageable. And the kids? Tom's expression darkened. "Emma's angry at everyone. Sarah for leaving, me for driving her away, you for destroying the family. Jake's just confused. He keeps asking when Mom is coming home." My heart broke for my grandchildren. At 17 and 15, they were old enough to understand the legal complexities, but too young to process the emotional devastation. Emma had refused to speak to me since Sarah's arrest, viewing me as the villain in her mother's story. "They'll come around," I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced. "Give them time." Tom pulled into the parking lot of Sunset Manor, the assisted living community where I'd decided to start my new life. It wasn't a senior community Sarah had always pushed. That place had been far too expensive and institutional. Sunset Manor was smaller, more intimate, with an emphasis on active living rather than medical care. My new apartment was a spacious one-bedroom unit with a small balcony overlooking the community gardens. After 43 years of maintaining a house, the idea of having someone else handle repairs and yard work was liberating. "Mom," Tom said as we unloaded boxes, "I still can't believe you're doing this. You could have kept the house, made Sarah's victims wait for restitution from the court. Tom, at my age, I've learned that money is just a tool. You can use it to build things or destroy them. I chose to build. He was quiet for a moment, then hugged me tightly. Sarah was an idiot to throw away a mother like you. I was settling into my new routine when the letter arrived. It was forwarded from my old address, postmarked from somewhere in Central America with no return address. My hands shook as I recognized Sarah's handwriting. Mom, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed you to know that I never meant for things to go this far. When I started taking money from clients, I told myself it was temporary, just until the business recovered. But once you start lying, it becomes easier to keep lying than to tell the truth. I know you'll never forgive me for what I did to you, and I don't blame you. I betrayed the person who loved me most in the world, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. I've been thinking a lot about what you said on the phone, about how I could have come to you for help. You're right. I was so afraid of disappointing you, of admitting that I wasn't the successful daughter you thought I was, that I chose crime over honesty. I want you to know that I'm safe. I can't tell you where I am, but I have enough money to survive, and I'm working on building a new life. It's a simple life, nothing like the luxury I thought I needed before. Please tell Emma and Jake that I love them, and that leaving them was the hardest thing I've ever done. Tell them that I hope someday they'll understand that I left to protect them from further embarrassment, not because I didn't love them. And Mom, please tell Tom that he's a good man, and that none of this was his fault. I hope he can rebuild his life and find happiness. I know I have no right to ask this, but please take care of my children. They're going to need their grandmother now more than ever. With love and profound regret.
Sarah.
P.S. I heard about what you did with the house money. I'm not surprised. You always were the strongest, most generous person I knew. I hope someday I can be half the woman you are. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Despite everything she'd done, she was still my daughter, and part of me would always love the little girl she'd been. But I also knew that the woman she'd become had made choices that couldn't be undone. The victims she'd hurt, the family she destroyed, the life she'd thrown away, these were consequences she would have to live with forever. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my jewelry box, next to the last photo I had of our family together, taken at Emma's high school graduation, when we were all still living in the illusion that we were happy. 2 weeks later, Tom asked me to join him for coffee at the diner downtown. He looked better than he had in months. The bruises had faded, and he'd gained back some of the weight he'd lost during the crisis. I wanted to update you on the bankruptcy proceedings, he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. The court has ruled that most of our debts were fraudulently incurred by Sarah without my knowledge. They're discharging about $200,000 in credit card and business debt. That's wonderful news. Yeah, and the insurance company is finally paying out on the construction projects that Sarah sabotaged. Turns out she'd been billing clients for work that was never completed, then pocketing the money. The insurance will cover the completion costs. So, you'll be able to keep the house? Actually, I've decided to sell it. Too many bad memories. He paused, looking uncomfortable. Amanda, there's something else. Emma wants to see you. My heart leaped. Really? She's been in therapy since Sarah left. The counselor helped her understand that you were trying to protect the family, not destroy it. She's still angry, but she wants to try to rebuild your relationship. That afternoon, I met my granddaughter at the park where I used to push her on the swings when she was little. At 17, Emma was beautiful, tall and blonde like her mother, but with Tom's kind eyes. Grandma, she said awkwardly, sitting beside me on the bench. Hello, sweetheart. We sat in silence for several minutes, watching children play on the equipment. I'm sorry, she said finally, for blaming you, for saying those horrible things. You don't need to apologize, Emma. You were protecting your mother. That's natural. But she was wrong, wasn't she? What she did to you, to all those people, there's no excuse for that. I took her hand. Your mother made some very bad choices, but that doesn't mean she never loved you. People are complicated, Emma. They can love you and still hurt you. Do you think she'll ever come back? I considered the question carefully. I don't know. But I know that you and Jake are going to be fine. You have your father and you have me, and we're going to make sure you both get through this. Emma leaned against my shoulder, and for the first time in months, I felt hope for our family's future. 1 year after Sarah's disappearance, life had settled into a new rhythm. I'd made friends at Sunset Manor, fellow retirees who appreciated my bridge skills and my willingness to help organize community events. My health was good, my finances stable, and most importantly, my relationship with Emma and Jake was healing. Tom had sold the house and moved into a modest apartment closer to his work. The construction business was slowly recovering, and he'd even started dating again, a kind woman named Linda who worked at the kids' school. Emma was thriving at the University of Connecticut, majoring in social work. She'd told me she wanted to help families in crisis, to be the person she wished had been there for ours. Jake, now 16, was doing well in high school and had started working part-time at Tom's construction company. I thought the chapter on Sarah was closed until Patricia called on a Tuesday morning in March. Amanda, I need to see you immediately. Something's happened. She arrived at Sunset Manor within the hour, carrying a thick envelope and wearing an expression I couldn't read. What is it, Patricia? The FBI called yesterday. They've located Sarah. My heart stuttered. Where? She's dead, Amanda. She died in a car accident in Guatemala 6 months ago. The words hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything she'd done, Sarah was still my daughter.
How?
What happened? According to the Guatemalan authorities, she was driving on a mountain road during a rainstorm. The car went off a cliff. She was killed instantly. I sat heavily in my chair, trying to process this information. 6 months ago? Why are we just hearing about it now? She was living under an assumed name. It took this long for the FBI to connect her fingerprints to our case. Patricia opened the envelope and pulled out several documents. There's more, Amanda. Before she died, Sarah had been working with a legal aid organization, helping abuse victims navigate the court system. She was also sending money. Sending money where? To a victim restitution fund she'd set up in Connecticut. Small amounts, maybe $500 a month, but regular. She'd been sending it for almost a year. I stared at the bank records Patricia showed me. Every month, like clockwork, Sarah had been sending money back to help repair the damage she'd caused. How much total? About $6,000. Not much compared to what she stole, but... Patricia shrugged. Maybe she was trying to make amends in the only way she could. That evening, I called Tom to break the news. His reaction surprised me. I'm relieved, he said quietly. I know that sounds terrible, but I've been living in fear that she'd come back someday and try to take the kids. Now they can finally move on. What about Emma and Jake? How do we tell them?
Together.
Can you come over tonight? The conversation with my grandchildren was one of the most difficult of my life. Emma cried, not from grief, exactly, but from the finality of it all. Jake was silent for a long time, then asked, Does this mean she never loved us? No, sweetheart, I said, pulling him close. It means she loved you so much that she thought you'd be better off without her. She was wrong about that, but the love was real. Later that week, we held a small memorial service. Not for the woman who had stolen and betrayed, but for the daughter, wife, and mother who had existed before greed and desperation consumed her. Only family attended, Tom, the kids, and me. We shared memories of better times. Sarah teaching Emma to ride a bike, helping Jake with his science fair projects, the way she used to laugh at Richard's terrible jokes. It wasn't closure exactly, but it was acknowledgement. We acknowledged her life, her love, and her failures with equal measure. 2 months after Sarah's memorial service, I received a visitor that caught me completely off guard. I was reading in my apartment when the front desk called to say that Mrs. Patterson was here to see me. Ruth Patterson was the 82-year-old widow Sarah had stolen $23,000 from, money Ruth had saved to pay for her late husband's medical bills. I'd met her briefly during the victim restitution proceedings, but we'd never spoken at length. "Mrs. Nimson," she said as I welcomed her into my apartment, "I hope you don't mind me dropping by unannounced." "Not at all. Please call me Amanda. Can I offer you some tea?" As I prepared tea in my small kitchen, Ruth examined my apartment with obvious curiosity. "This is lovely. Much cozier than those big assisted living places. I like it here. It's peaceful." Ruth settled into my reading chair with a sigh. "Amanda, I came to thank you." "Thank me? For giving up your house to make sure we all got our money back. I know what that place meant to you. I lost my family home too when my husband got sick. It's not just money, it's memories." I sat across from her, touched by her understanding. "Ruth, what your daughter did to you, to all of us, was unforgivable. I couldn't make it right for everyone and still sleep at night." "That's just it," Ruth said, leaning forward. "You could have. Legally, you didn't owe us anything. Your daughter stole from you too, but you chose to help us anyway." We talked for over an hour, sharing stories about our children, our marriages, our losses. As Ruth prepared to leave, she surprised me again. "Amanda, I'm part of a group that meets every Tuesday evening at the community center. Other seniors who've been victims of financial fraud or elder abuse. Would you consider joining us?" "I don't know. I'm not sure I'm ready to." "Think about it," Ruth said gently. "Sometimes the best healing comes from helping others heal." The following Tuesday, I found myself walking into the Millbrook Community Center's small conference room. About 15 people sat in a circle, men and women ranging from their 60s to their 90s, all with the same wary expression I'd worn for months after discovering Sarah's theft. Ruth introduced me to the group. "This is Amanda Nimson. Some of you might recognize her name from the news coverage of the Fletcher case." A murmur ran through the room. These people knew my story, knew what my daughter had done. "Amanda," Ruth continued, "chose to sell her family home to make sure all of Sarah Fletcher's victims received full restitution. She turned a story of betrayal into one of healing. For the next 2 hours, I listened to stories that made my heart ache. Grandparents who'd lost their savings to fake charity scams. Widowers bilked by romance fraudsters. Elderly couples who'd been conned out of their retirement by smooth-talking investment advisors. But I also heard stories of resilience, of people who'd rebuilt their lives after devastating losses, of families who'd grown stronger in the face of betrayal. When it was my turn to speak, I found myself talking not just about Sarah's crimes, but about the choice I'd made afterward. "The worst part wasn't the money," I said. "It was the loss of trust. When your own child betrays you, it makes you question everything you thought you knew about family, about love, about the world." Heads nodded around the circle. These people understood. "But I learned something important," I continued. "You can choose how to respond to betrayal. You can let it make you bitter and suspicious, or you can use it to build something better." After the meeting, several people approached me. Margaret Williams, whose son had stolen her entire pension, wanted my advice on how to rebuild her relationship with her grandchildren. James Morrison, conned by a fake financial advisor, was struggling with whether to testify in the upcoming trial. "It's scary," he admitted, "standing up in court, having everyone know how stupid I was." "You weren't stupid," I said firmly. "You were trusting. There's a difference." Driving home that night, I realized Ruth had been right. Helping others process their trauma was helping me process mine. These people weren't looking for pity. They were looking for hope, for proof that life could continue after betrayal. I started attending the Tuesday meetings regularly. Within a few months, I'd become an unofficial mentor to newer members, sharing my experience and offering practical advice on everything from dealing with lawyers to rebuilding family relationships. The group also gave me a new sense of purpose. We began advocating for stronger elder abuse laws, speaking at community events about fraud prevention, and supporting other victims through the legal process. One evening, as I was leaving the community center, I ran into Detective Morrison, who'd handled Sarah's case. "Mrs. Nimson, good to see you. How are you doing?" "Very well, thank you. Are you here for the self-defense class?" He grinned. "My mother-in-law signed up. She's determined to learn how to protect herself after reading about all these scams in the news." "Good for her. It's never too late to learn new skills." "Speaking of which," Morrison said, his expression growing more serious, "I've been following the work you're doing with the fraud victims group. It's impressive. It's been therapeutic. Have you ever considered taking it further? We've been looking for someone to help train our officers on how to better handle elder abuse cases. Someone who understands what victims go through." The suggestion intrigued me. "What would that involve?" "Consulting on cases, maybe helping with interviews when we have elderly victims. A lot of seniors won't report these crimes because they're embarrassed or afraid their families will think they're losing their mental capacity." I thought about my own reluctance to report Sarah initially, about the shame and self-doubt I'd felt. I'd be interested in learning more. As I drove home that night, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed. A year and a half ago, I'd been a retired librarian, living quietly in my family home, blissfully unaware that my daughter was systematically destroying lives. Now I was an advocate, a mentor, and potentially a consultant to law enforcement. Sarah's betrayal had forced me out of my comfortable routine and into a world where I could make a real difference. It wasn't the retirement I'd planned, but it was the one I needed. The call came on a crisp October morning, almost 2 years to the day since I'd first discovered Sarah's theft. I was preparing for my weekly visit with Emma, who was home from college for fall break, when my phone rang. "Mrs. Nimson? This is Agent Sarah Martinez with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. We have some new developments in your daughter's case that I think you'll want to know about." My heart skipped. "Has someone been arrested?" "Not exactly. Mrs. Nimson, we've discovered that your daughter was working as an informant for Guatemalan authorities before her death. She'd been helping them investigate a money laundering operation that was targeting American retirees." I sank into my chair, stunned. "An informant?" "She'd been providing information about how these scams work from the American side. Her background in real estate fraud made her valuable to their investigation." "But why? Why would she risk herself like that?" Agent Martinez paused. "According to her handler in Guatemala, she said she was trying to make up for the harm she'd caused. She wanted to prevent other families from going through what yours did." After hanging up, I sat in my apartment staring out at the community gardens, trying to process this new information about my daughter. Even in exile, even while living under an assumed name, Sarah had been fighting the same fight I was, protecting vulnerable seniors from financial predators. It didn't excuse what she'd done to me, to Tom, to her other victims. But it suggested that somewhere in the woman who'd betrayed us all, the daughter I'd raised still existed. That afternoon, Emma and I met for lunch at our usual spot, a small cafe downtown that served excellent soup and sandwiches. At 19, she'd grown into a poised young woman with a quiet strength that reminded me of myself at that age. "Grandma," she said after I'd shared the FBI's news, "do you think Mom was trying to redeem herself?" "I think she was trying to live with herself," I replied carefully. "Redemption is something other people give you. Peace is something you have to find for yourself." Emma was quiet for a moment, stirring her soup thoughtfully.
I've been thinking about something.
"My social work professor has been talking about restorative justice, helping victims heal by giving them a voice in how crimes are addressed. That sounds like what we've been doing with a support group.
Exactly.
Grandma, what if we started a foundation? Something focused on helping families recover from financial elder abuse. The idea was intriguing. What would that look like? Education, support groups, maybe even financial assistance for victims who can't recover their losses. We could call it the Sarah Fletcher Foundation, not to honor her, but to make sure her story prevents other tragedies. I was amazed by Emma's vision and maturity. That's a wonderful idea, sweetheart. But it would be a lot of work. I know. But I want to do something meaningful with my life, something that comes from our experience. And I think it's what Mom would have wanted in the end. Over the following months, Emma and I worked together to establish the foundation. Tom contributed his business skills, helping us navigate the legal requirements and set up proper governance. Jake, now a senior in high school, created a website and social media presence with the tech-savvy enthusiasm of his generation. The foundation's mission was threefold: education about elder financial abuse, support for victims and their families, and advocacy for stronger legal protections. We partnered with the police department, the district attorney's office, and other nonprofits to create a comprehensive response system. Our first major event was a community awareness day held at the Millbrook Community Center. We expected maybe 50 people. Over 200 showed up. Ruth Patterson spoke about her experience as a victim and the importance of reporting crimes. Detective Morrison presented on warning signs and prevention strategies. I talked about the choice we all face when betrayed, to become bitter or to become better. But the most powerful speaker was Emma. Standing at the podium in her simple blue dress, she looked so much like Sarah at that age that my breath caught. My mother was a criminal, she began, her voice steady and clear. She stole from vulnerable people, including her own mother. For a long time, I was angry at everyone. At her for leaving, at my grandmother for prosecuting her, at the world for being unfair. The room was completely silent. But I've learned that anger is a choice. Forgiveness is a choice. And how we respond to tragedy is a choice. My grandmother chose to use her pain to help others. My mother, in her final years, chose to try to make amends. I'm choosing to carry on that work. After the event, people approached us with their own stories, their own needs for support and guidance. We exchanged contact information, shared resources, and planted the seeds for what would become a network of mutual support throughout Fairfield County. That evening, as I was cleaning up my apartment after the long day, I found myself looking at the last family photo I had, the one from Emma's high school graduation. Sarah's smile looked different now, less perfect but more human. She'd been struggling even then, probably desperately trying to hold her world together while it crumbled around her.
My phone rang. It was Tom.
Amanda, I wanted to thank you. For what? For everything. For not giving up on our family after Sarah destroyed it. For showing Emma and Jake that they could build something good from something terrible. Tom, we all did that together. No, you led the way. You could have retreated into bitterness and isolation. Instead, you chose to fight for all of us. After we hung up, I realized he was right, but not in the way he thought. I hadn't been fighting for them. I'd been fighting for myself. For the right to define my own response to betrayal. For the right to choose hope over despair, action over victimhood. Sarah had taken my money, my trust, and my illusions about family. But she hadn't taken my power to choose what came next. And that, perhaps, was the sweetest revenge of all. 5 years have passed since I first discovered Sarah's theft, and I'm writing this final chapter for my new office at the Sarah Fletcher Foundation. We've helped over 300 families recover from financial elder abuse, trained dozens of law enforcement officers, and successfully advocated for stronger penalties for these crimes. Emma graduated last month with her master's in social work and has taken over as the foundation's executive director. She's brilliant at the work, bringing both professional expertise and personal understanding to every case. Jake is studying business at UConn, planning to add his skills to our efforts after graduation. Tom remarried Linda 2 years ago in a small ceremony at their new home. They've created a blended family that includes Linda's teenage daughter, and they've all grown close to my grandchildren. It's not the family we started with, but it's a good family, one built on honesty rather than illusion. I still live at Sunset Manor, though I've moved to a larger apartment to accommodate my office space and the growing collection of thank you letters from families we've helped. My health remains good, my mind sharp, and my purpose clear. But this story isn't really about what happened after Sarah's crimes were discovered. It's about the choice that defines every victim of betrayal, how to respond when someone you love destroys your trust. I could have retreated into my wounded pride, content to be a victim for the rest of my life. I could have spent my remaining years bitter and suspicious, telling anyone who'd listen about my ungrateful daughter who stole from her own mother. Instead, I chose revenge, but not the kind Sarah expected. My revenge wasn't about punishment or payback. It was about transformation. I transformed her legacy of theft and betrayal into a force for healing and protection. I took the worst thing that had ever happened to me and used it to prevent the same thing from happening to others. Every family we help is a victory over Sarah's crimes. Every dollar we recover for victims is money stolen from her destructive legacy. Every person who reports elder abuse because of our education efforts is someone she can never hurt. That's the revenge I chose, to make her failure fuel other people's success. I received one final letter from Sarah, written before her death, but only delivered to me last year through the FBI. In it, she wrote, "Mom, I know I can never undo the damage I caused, but I hope someday you'll find a way to use what happened to us for something good. You always were better at building things than I was at destroying them." She was right. I was better at building than she was at destroying. 3 months ago, I was diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer. The doctors are optimistic, caught early, highly treatable, good prognosis. But it's reminded me that time is finite, even for the strongest among us. Emma was devastated when I told her, but I reminded her of something important. I'm not afraid of dying anymore. I'm afraid of dying before the work is finished. We've prevented hundreds of families from experiencing what we went through. We've recovered millions of dollars for victims who thought their money was gone forever. We've trained law enforcement officers to handle these cases with compassion and expertise. But there are still predators out there, still vulnerable seniors being targeted, still families being destroyed by financial abuse. The work isn't finished. It may never be finished. But that's okay. The foundation will continue after I'm gone. Emma and Jake will carry it forward, along with the dozens of volunteers and staff members who've joined our cause. Sarah thought she could destroy our family with her greed and betrayal. Instead, she gave us a mission that has strengthened us beyond anything we thought possible. That's the funny thing about revenge. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about hurting the person who hurt you. Sometimes it's about proving that they couldn't break you. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. If you enjoyed Amanda's incredible story of transformation and justice, please subscribe to her true stories and hit that notification bell. We share amazing tales of strength, resilience, and triumph every week. Your support helps us bring you more inspiring stories like this one. Thank you for being part of our community, and remember, it's never too late to turn your pain into purpose. This story is dedicated to all the survivors of elder financial abuse who choose healing over hatred, action over anger, and hope over despair. Your strength inspires us all.